Awesome. So we've got a few people joining now. Thank you all for tuning in. We might just give it another minute or two and just let some people join before we kick off.
Does anyone have any good jokes in the meantime? Dave,
I'm trying to remember town planning jokes from uni. Nothing's coming to mind.
There's such thing as a town planning joke? I thought we were all very serious. Who do we have joining? Mary? Mary's here.
Yeah, got nearly 50 people so far, which is awesome.
Where's everyone from? Yeah. Where's everyone from? Chuck something in the chat. Tell us where you're from. I know that this has gone out to the whole world, so I'm interested to see. Yeah, we've got Adelaide. Interested to see if we have any Americans in here.
Yeah.
Sydney, Brisbane, Gold Coast. Look at that.
Awesome. Queensland representing.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about NRL or football here, but Brisbane doesn't have much to say about that right now.
No. All right. Well, look, I might just give a bit of a kick-off and introduction while the last few people join. Thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate it. My name is Lucy Booth. I'm from Giraffe. I'm one of the founders. I'm also an urban planner, so this topic is pretty close to my heart. So these masterclasses that we host are really just about showcasing our customers and their expertise in different areas. Obviously today is about subdivisions. Our last masterclass that we held 2 weeks ago was with Liam Walsh from Sustainable East, who has built a pretty detailed financial feasibility module that sits within Giraffe called Visual Fin. So if you're interested in seeing that masterclass, we'll be sending a link around to our directory afterwards and you can have a look. But today we're really, really excited to have Alex Steffen from Steffen Town Planning presenting. He's one of our earliest and most engaged customers, which is really awesome. So this is a topic that he knows everything and anything about, I think, and he will be joined by Shane Edwards from Pembroke Consulting and Dave Weston from DRW Consulting. I guess the three of them know a lot about this topic. I have done a number of subdivisions as a graduate planner, and they're sort of singed into my memory, you know, moving every lot boundary 0.5 or 2.5 meters is a pretty painful process. And so we've tried to find a way to make that a little bit easier and a more flexible process. But I'll leave that into him. The guys are going to go into a bit of a deep dive on, start to finish for subdivisions. Please feel free to drop questions into the question box or panel, the chat panel, as we go, and I'll try my best to just interject with your questions as we go. So I'm going to mute myself and I'll hand over to Alex.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lucy, and thanks to Giraffe for hosting this masterclass. Just a very, very quick, brief history on who I am, if you don't know. So my name's Alex Steffen. I am a private consultant town planner. I have a Bachelor of Urban and Environmental Planning, Director of Steffen Town Planning, founder of Properties, which we'll use today, and founder of URPEC, which is the Urban and Regional Planning Education Centre. We're located in East Brisbane in Australia. Queensland. We've been operating for about 13 years from our office. We have about 40 years of experience with 6 or 7 town planners in our office and a development manager. So not only do we actually get the approvals for these things, we also manage the construction of subdivision projects. So like I said, we're doing a masterclass today. So I do a lot of presentations on subdivision. I talk about subdivision a lot. but this is by far the deepest I've ever got with anything. Usually I have 10, 15 minutes to, do the top 4 things that are the biggest painful things for subdivision. This is the first time that I've ever had a full hour to really delve deep. So thanks again to Giraffe for giving me this opportunity, and hopefully everyone learns something out of it. I've also got, as Lucy mentioned, Shane from Pembroke Construction. He is the guy that digs the holes, as I like to say. So Shane, feel free to jump in whenever you want. And if you've got questions for Shane throughout, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll see if we can get to them. And we've got Dave Weston from DRW Consulting, who's a civil engineer. So Dave designs them, Shane constructs them, and we get approval for them. So in my opinion, in terms of the cost and feasibility of a subdivision project, we've pretty much got everyone in this webinar that you need. What we'll be covering today, I'll go through this fairly quickly. The plan is to kind of smash through the content and then take some questions at the end. So today we'll be going through what tools and resources could help you do a subdivision, how to get started on your first one, how to build a team and who should be on your team, what the first steps are in designing and testing a subdivision, what the key issues are to avoid. So there's a range of issues that could ever come up. So we'll go through some of those. We'll live draw a subdivision using Giraffe, and it's going to absolutely blow your minds. I can guarantee you that. We'll go through the total cost of a subdivision, and it's insane once you start going into it where all those costs come from and how expensive or cheap it can actually be. We'll also go into some tips on how to avoid delays, how to keep your costs down, the process of actually completing a subdivision, and then, like I said, Q&A, but feel free to pop questions into the chat box throughout, and I'll try to get to them if I can. So firstly, we want to give you the best chances of success if you're doing a subdivision. It can be extremely complicated. There is literally hundreds of people that can be involved with a subdivision, starting from town planners, surveyors, engineers, solicitors, people at council, people in the state government. So the more you can familiarize yourself with that process by educating yourself, that will really add to your success right from the beginning. Get familiar with technology and online resources, things like properties, which I'll show you shortly, things like Giraffe. We use Giraffe all day, every day in our office. And I'll be honest, I can't imagine life without it anymore. So hopefully that keeps going into the future. Things like RP Data, Price Finder, most councils and state governments have lots of resources that you can check out. Another thing that you could do, which we're seeing a bigger trend in happening in the last 5 years, is seeking a mentorship from a local developer or a property mentor. There's people out there now that have these courses or mentorships where you essentially pay to have access to their brain for 1 to 3 months, and they will really guide you down the right path in making sure that your first subdivision is a success. So have a look around your local community, have a look at local developers, see who's doing what, have a chat with them, and start networking. I mean, I know Dave and Shane, well, we've worked before, but I mainly see them at a property network group in Brisbane called the Brisbane Property Group. And I see them once a month, and we get in a room full of 100, 120 developers, and we just chat about property development. The amount of information that you can learn doing that is insane. There's also a lot of online courses. As I mentioned at the start, we have ERPEC, which is an online education platform that teaches developers, students, and professionals stuff about property development and town planning. So check that website out. And another thing that you can do is very easy, is research similar developments in your area, see what happened. So if you want to get into property development because you saw, the guy down the street did a subdivision, go research their approval, call council, see what happened, see what their problems were, see how long it took. You can really learn a lot by seeing what other people's mistakes were, or what they did well. So how to get started. I think there's a couple of different ways to get started in a subdivision project. You can either, what I think, and I see the most success in what people do, is they become a local in a specific area. it's very hard to be knowledgeable over an entire state government or country for a subdivision. There's so many little intricacies in any development that my recommendation would become a local. So know what prices are going to be in that suburb, know what's for sale, know what could be for sale, know what it'll sell for, know the local planning scheme requirements. So you have everything all up in your brain, so you don't need to call a town planner, you don't need to call a local agent, because you're so familiar with that local market. And then when an opportunity comes up, you can almost instantly know whether it's a good one or not, and not waste any time. Likewise, once you familiarize yourself and you've upskilled yourself, take advantage of all these online resources that there are now, like RP data, like properties, Giraffe, RP data, price finder. There's so many things out there now that you don't need to waste time researching yourself anymore, because people have built apps to help you fast track that. So don't shy away. I mean, properties, for example, is $500 a year. If you get one deal because of that, I don't even know, it's like a 10,000% return on your investment. So don't be scared to spend some money. So you've researched an area, you've upskilled yourself, you're confident in what you want to buy and how much money you're going to make. Now, the next thing you need to do is build a team of trusted consultants. I love saying this, but really the first person you should be calling and making a good connection with is a local town planner. It doesn't necessarily need to be a town planner local to that suburb or that region. It just needs to be a planner that you can see works in that area. So they don't necessarily need to be, we're in Brisbane, but we do a lot of work in Townsville and Cairns and Roma. So it doesn't necessarily need to limit yourself to just that, the 5 planners that live in your city. So make a good connection with a local town planner. Most of us are pretty friendly, I think. And we generally have a very good network of consultants that will be able to help you. So we deal with conveyance solicitors all the time, and we could make sure that whoever you're dealing with, that when you're putting a property under contract, it's got good terms in that contract to make sure that you don't end up getting stuck with the lemon. So we do all the work, we lodge the application, council refuse it for some unknown reason, or some unforeseen reason, and then you're just stuck with the property. So a good conveyancer will make sure that you have clauses in there. So, the purchase of this property is subject to a satisfactory development approval from council, for example. That way you're never wasting too much money. Another one, very important person in this process, is a good civil engineer. We've got Dave Weston here. I consider him a good civil engineer, fortunately. So yeah, civil engineer will be integral in any subdivision project. So you need to be friends with one, you need to have one on your team, and a town planner usually will be the person to recommend someone. You'll have to have a surveyor, a cadastral land surveyor. Someone's got to draw this thing, someone's got to map it out. We use tools like Giraffe to conceptualize these subdivisions and then just send them to the surveyor to draw up. We don't necessarily draw subdivision proposal plans for council, because that is the job of a surveyor. The next person on your team that you're going to have is a civil contractor, and that's why we have Shane Edwards here from Pembroke, because yeah, there he is. Because there's no point having a great conveyancer, a great town planner, awesome civil engineer, a really perfect team of people, if just the whole thing's going to cost too much to build. And you need to be talking to someone like Shane right from the beginning to make sure that whatever you're doing, the costs are actually going to stack up so you're making money, because why are you doing it otherwise? And there's a lot of other people that might end up being in that team of trusted consultants, but generally if you start with those couple that are on the screen, you'll be set in the right path. Electrical consultants are also another one that are quite important. So you've got your team, you've got your knowledge, you've got your feasibility that you've put together. Now what? This is where taking advantage of technology can really help you streamline your feasibility. So the number one question is, well, how many lots am I actually going to reasonably achieve here? So the planning scheme, and you might know that the minimum lot size is 400 square meters, but you look at the site and go, well, how am I going to get 400 square meters on there? And that's where we really start taking advantage of tools like Giraffe. which we will in 1 second. But before I do that, I think it's valuable to know what some of those key issues can be attached to a subdivision. So there's no point drawing a subdivision plan if there's absolutely no chance of it being approved by councils. So some of those key issues, I hope we have some non-Australians in here because I put this beautiful picture of a koala. So key issues to look out for: slope. Slope is always a problem. It creates stormwater discharge issues. It creates, no one wants to buy a sloping block. So it creates a range of issues having a steep property to subdivide. Generally, you want a block that's sloping towards the street or towards some kind of council and stormwater infrastructure. That seems to be across Australia anyway. Internationally, I would assume they have some kind of similar rule. And the idea is that council want to make sure that if they're approving a subdivision, the stormwater from that new property is not just going to be, creating a stream straight into the neighbor's bedroom. So look out for a slope. Generally, you want it flat or sloping slightly towards the street. Biodiversity or environmental significance, hence the koala, are very big topics. You really need to make sure that a property is not covered in some kind of biodiversity or environmental overlay. Generally, my rule of thumb is if you go to a site and you're looking to subdivide it and there's a lot of trees, then it instantly should be a red flag for you to investigate further. And that's when you should, for example, call a town planner such as myself to see what impact those trees could have on a prospective development. One that's the next one, which is very valid in Australia and probably actually in America at the moment, is a bushfire hazard. So councils do not want to be approving more density and more population in areas that are at risk to a bushfire. It's common sense. So if a property has a bushfire hazard overlay, then you will be required to demonstrate that there is no risk to people's lives or safety by doing that subdivision. Very important one that can stop a whole subdivision from happening. Next one is character or heritage. Depending on where you are, this can be a major issue or it can be not an issue at all. Places like Tasmania have half the property in Tasmania is heritage listed. In Brisbane and Queensland, we have a lot of character overlays, and these things will stop buildings from being demolished, which then stops your subdivision from happening because you can't put a new property boundary right through the middle of a house. The next one, improvements in the verge. This seems to be something that people miss a lot in our experience. And the verge is the council strip, the part between the front of the boundary and the gutter, the road gutter. So the amount of times that we will get sent a property that someone's already purchased, and then we get the property up, the first thing I do is chuck it up on Google Street View and see that there's a bus stop right out the front. Then next to the bus stop is a power pole. And my question to them is, well, how are you going to get access to the new lot that you're creating? Because council's not going to let you put it right through the middle of a bus stop. So always check what's in the verge. There could be something there that stops the whole thing from occurring. The next one, flooding, very relevant. Again, there's a lot of things that happen in Australia, I'm realizing going through this list. But yeah, flooding's another key one. There's been a lot of flooding lately in New South Wales and Southeast Queensland. If a property is similar to the bushfire hazard, if a property is flood affected, council don't want to be approving more people at risk to that flood event. So if you see a flood overlay, or if you go to a property and it seems a bit wet, then yeah, make sure you look into that a bit further. Access to infrastructure, lawful points of discharge, that's where civil engineers really come into it. There's only, in my opinion, so much research you can and so much information you can know about infrastructure. It's really best to leave it to the specialists and professionals such as Dave Weston from DRW. And the reason being that you might see a pipe there and go, cool, there's no problems with that, with the access to infrastructure, there's a pipe there. And then Dave looks at it and go, well, that pipe's only 50 mil wide. It can't have capacity for more. So unless you upgrade the entire 100 meter pipe, then you can't do the subdivision. So very important to talk to a civil engineer at that point. And if any of these things come up, talk to a town planner. It doesn't have to be me. We only work in Queensland, so I can't help you outside of Queensland, but talk to your friendly town planner that you've already made a connection with, because they will have solutions for all of these problems. Or alternatively, they'll just tell you that there is no solution, that you should be moving on to the next one. So how am I going for time? 9:20 where I am. So now I thought we could have a look at a site together. So actually use the technology to our advantage and talk through a subdivision process. So firstly, what we're going to do is use properties. So let me, maybe before I do that, I'm seeing the chat. How's the chat going? Jackie, yep, we'll share some stuff. So there doesn't seem to be any questions yet, but if you have some, fire them my way. So we picked this property at random in Ferny Grove. So we use properties to have a look at it, and it's as simple as clicking the site and generating a report. So using technology to our advantage, pretending I have absolutely no idea about town planning, this report will immediately tell you what zone it's in, what neighborhood plan precincts, the property dimensions, the development potential, which is probably the key one that we want to know about in both subdivision and multiple dwellings. It'll then back that up with this specific data. So in this instance, we can have down to 350 square meter lots with a 7.5 meter frontage. So that's really what we're caring about here today. So that's what we're going to try to achieve. So 16 lots, it's a bit of a weird shaped allotment. It's got a very small frontage. So what do you think? Do you think we could get 16 lots there? That's the $1 million question probably in this instance. So the best way, again, taking advantage of technology, is flipping over to Giraffe. And this is going to blow your mind how easy this is to do. Hang on, I'm going to move my screen sharing thing out of the way. So we've now got that exact same property up in Giraffe, and let's have a look. So access is by, there looks like to be a little easement there, and we can tell that by looking at this overlay that I've added. So it does appear to be an easement down this front section, which will warrant some further investigation, but for now we'll just pretend it's not there. So being in an emerging community zone, you do have to provide a structure plan as part of any development. So you have to show how that development is going to connect through to the surrounding development. So naturally, I'm seeing a road that should probably come through here. So Giraffe is as easy as clicking, adding a road, and drawing it on there.
If only roads were that easy to make, Alex.
Yeah, well, they are, aren't they? That's
Alex and I, they're very easy, Shane. No problem.
Yeah. So using the information over here on the left, you can actually change how wide the road is, how big the verge is. So we've gone with a fairly standard typology, which is 6 meter wide road, 4 meter wide footpaths, and now we've got a road. So we can kind of see where that site might align, where the property might be able to be developed. So we'll try to tuck this in on the site itself. Now we're going to add the subdivision component. So again, it's as easy as clicking the subdivision link and start drawing the area that you want to subdivide. And you can be as detailed as you want. For me, using this tool, it's just about getting a general feasibility, but you can actually really go into the depths of it and make sure every single boundary is exactly correct. So we probably don't want to split down the middle of this site because we're going to likely have all the sites come off this road. So we can turn that spine off. Now it's automatically kind of pre-populated sites at 20 meter widths and 1,000 meters. So we know that we can have 350 square meter lots. So let's put that as the minimum. If I just can use my own computer, enter. Alrighty, so what do we got? 22 lots. Well, that's too many. We can only have 16 according to the planning scheme. And the issue here is we've got 350 square meter lots, 9.5. So we need to somehow get that number down because we're exceeding the total amount of density prescribed in the planning scheme. So something that I found is very useful is changing the actual lot widths opposed to, so we still got 17 lots, lot widths opposed to area. So we've got 17 lots, 10 meter wide frontages. So let's go 12.5, 14 lots. That looks pretty good, actually. What do we reckon? All right, so we've now got a pretty simple feasibility. Probably the main issue is that there's no access to these rear lots. So we're gonna have to fix that, put another road in, I think. What we could probably argue at this point is that this road could be an access handle opposed to a road. So if we just turn that to a 6 meter wide concrete driveway. So what I'm doing right now is something that would usually take us, I'm going to say at least 3 or 4 hours to complete, and thousands of dollars. I mean, my fee's $300 an hour. So, I mean, we're doing this for an hour. So, you know, this could cost at least $1,200. I think I'd charge you to draw this outside of Giraffe, but you can draw it yourself now. So here we go. So we put that access road in. Now we're at 14 lots. So that's looking pretty good. I think that's fairly reasonable. If I was doing a feasibility, I'd be fairly comfortable with that. But let's look at those key planning issues. So we're going to try to keep it just to the planning issues at the moment. So we go over here to the layers section. Let's put on some Brisbane City Council controls. What do we have there? Biodiversity. Okay. So we have a huge biodiversity area right up the back there. We know, and you will know once you look at these things, the council don't want to let you remove trees. We do have some, actually, let's see if there is trees there. So using all the mapping, you can add any mapping you want in Giraffe, which is just amazing. You just go add new layer, you can search from any of the ones that they have, or you can create your own layers, which is just great. You can see all the ones that I have here. And if you have an organization, your boss can upload layers. So very handy tool. So we've added some of these layers. So we can see that whole part of the property that's covered in that biodiversity areas overlay is very densely vegetated. So let's be honest, council aren't going to let us subdivide there. So let's pull that down. I think if we go there, there's probably still decent building pad. Let's reduce the length of that access driveway. All right, now we're at 8 lots. So our feasibility, on the face of it, you could have easily got 22 lots. You could have easily got down to 16 lots, which we thought was fairly reasonable. And now using this tool, in a matter of minutes, we're now down to 8 lots. So that is the advantage of using a tool like this. So let's leave that there for now, and we'll jump back into that a bit later and see if we can make that even better. So back to the presentation. What do people think about that? Does anyone have any questions? All right, we've got some people asking some Giraffe specific questions about the subdivision tool. So we'll get onto that a bit later.
Rachel had a really good question about do we need a road if there's only 8 lots?
It's a very good question. So that's something that we're going to start looking into a little bit later. So hold that thought, and we'll jump into that. There we go. So what are the costs involved? This is where everything can be made or broken. We do in our office with the 6 or 7 of us, we probably lodge, I'm going to say 2 to 4 subdivisions a week we handle. And generally they cost between $10,000 to $12,000 all up for the application to council. I'm not going to go through each individual number, but you can kind of see them there, and we'll send this PowerPoint out as part of the recording. So generally $10,000 to $12,000 will get you a development application lodged and approved or refused, depending which way it goes. It can be more expensive if there's additional reports or significant issues. It can be cheaper if there's absolutely no issues. So, but generally 10 to 12 is what we find. Where the real costs start coming into it is at that construction and design phase. So this is where and why Shane and Dave are very important to these projects, because this is where the real costs come into it. So, you know, project management up to 8,000, tree clearing, probably relevant to the one that we're looking at, could be up to 10,000. So there's some pretty big costs there, but as you can see, they can be very cheap. They can be very expensive. I like to chuck this meme in there. The NBN works 60% of the time. 60% of the time, it works every time. Very relevant, which is why I'm currently doing this webinar from work, not from home. So it's still going, construction design. So all up, once you actually get onto the site and start digging and connecting things and putting sewer lines in, you're looking at a total cost between 40 to 100,000, and you're still not done. So that's on top of the 10 to 12. So we're now potentially at 112,000. And then you've got your planned ceiling process. So again, going through those, I'm not going to go individually through those costs, but you're looking at up to 16,000 to actually get those plans sealed. Plan sealing is the process of actually getting your titles from council. And then you've also got an infrastructure contribution to council, which is basically, if you're increasing the density, then council is going to have to maintain the services in that area to account for that increased density. So in Queensland, for example, they charge about 29,500. So all up, a very, very simple 1 into 2 lot subdivision. So this is just taking one lot, turning it into 2. You're looking at up to 163,000. And this is not a conclusive amount. This is like guesstimating things that could or could not go wrong. And that's per lot. So this is not for that project that we were just working on in Giraffe. This is actually just for a very simple 1 into 2 lot subdivision. It can be very cheap at the same time. 90,000 I think is probably on the cheaper side of a subdivision these days, but it is quite expensive. And a lot of that, if you look, the costs are in that operational works phase. I initially didn't have this part of my presentation, and I ran it around our office, and I said to all the guys and girls, what do you want to add to this presentation? And the key thing was how long these things can be delayed, and which creates added costs, tighter deadlines, and the biggest issue becomes, well, it costs everyone money. Basically, it frustrates your consultants. It makes your lender or the bank or whoever's putting up the money get frustrated. So here are some key tips that I recommend all of our clients do and everyone that's working on a subdivision project does. And number 1, make executive decisions. If you tender the subdivision, construction of it, and you get 5 different quotes, all of them are generally around the same price or something, generally propose the same thing, make a call. Don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on it for 3 weeks. Don't say, oh, I'm going to have a look at it over the weekend. And then it gets to Monday, go, oh, I'm just going to think about it till Friday. Just look at it there and then make a decision, push ahead. If someone comes recommended, use them. Generally, they come recommended because someone like myself has been dealing with them for 15 years and have dealt with everyone. And we've settled with this person being the best for the best price. Don't delay over small added costs. The amount of times I see subdivision projects that are probably worth upwards of $2 million be delayed over $500 of out of scope costs is just crazy. Like, people squabble over this $200 fee in their $2 million project, and it delays everything by 3 months. And not only does it delay it, it kind of gets everyone offside and puts this kind of bad energy in the air around the project. So if there's a tiny added cost and it's reasonable and the consultants come recommended, just get it paid, get on with it. Trust them. Trust the people that you've been recommended. These are people as part of your team. Yep.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, but we've had a good question, I think, that's pretty relevant. Brent has asked, are there any economies of scale when you're doing these subdivisions? So instead of 1 to 2, if you go to 4 or 6 or something,
yeah.
Are you able to talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Probably a good one for Shane, actually. Shane, yeah. What do you think? If you're doing, so our rule of thumb is, if you're doing, then the next lot in addition is half the price of the first lot. Do you have kind of a rule of thumb?
Look, there are rules of thumb, but generally the reason people do bigger projects is because as the number of lots increases, the cost per lot decreases to a point. But I found that it also will depend on the site if it's really sloping or really difficult. But you can probably get a subdivision down to about $50,000 or $60,000 a lot, maybe even a little bit lower for the construction costs once you start getting into those economies of scale. But real important things to look out for are flat sites and sites with good access to infrastructure, like what you said before, Alex. So
so there does seem to be an economy of scale, and generally, I think as soon as you get more than one, then it starts lowering the costs every time to about down to 50 to 60 grand, it sounds like, which is generally what we tell our clients too. But you always want to make sure you're running it past someone. So get Shane's details at the end of this presentation.
Can I mention something too, Alex, just very quickly?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
just want to everyone listening, I want to back up Alex in terms of putting together a really great team. I see this as, and probably the other guys will agree with me, it's probably one of the biggest problems out there, and that is that people put together the cheapest team and not the best team. The amount of money you save on a consultant team is very minimal to what you can save in time and construction costs for smart design, great teamwork, and reducing overall timeframes for your whole life of the project. So I see this as a massive issue. I had one recently. It was only a 2-lot subdivision. We had another engineer that my client went with initially, didn't do a very good job, ended up coming back to me asking me, Dave, can you save this job? And we ended up basically saving $70,000 on a 2-lot subdivision. Wasted 3 months of the project life, but $70,000 was significant because initially she had the wrong team. So just wanted to throw that in for everyone, that the team is just so important. And the good guys will be hard to get because they're usually busy.
I want to. I could also chat about that one too. I mean, I had a project where there was a whole lot of underground tanks that had been designed by another engineer, and they were all concrete tanks in a suburb called Logan, which is in the sort of the Greater Brisbane area. And I remember taking that job through to Dave, and they did a redesign on it. And I think they saved like $150,000 on that project because they changed some of the earthworks plans. They changed the way the concrete. So they removed the concrete tanks, they put prefabricated tanks in, and we're able to save a lot of money. So yeah, so the design is really important, really, really important. Good engineering design makes all the difference, especially as the projects start to get a bit bigger, and even small ones like the one that Dave's talking about.
Yeah, well, that's it. Cheap is cheap for a reason, 100% of the time. If you get 3 quotes, for example, for planning, if you get 3 quotes, one of them's $4,000, one of them's $3,000, and one of them's $1,000, I guarantee the $4,000 one is probably $4,000 for a reason. But that being said, then there are companies will charge $10,000 for something that's probably only $3,000. So there's probably a limit there to when cheap is cheap for a reason, but then things are expensive for a reason too. So yeah. So, and being proactive is the other thing that can be really, really delay a project. So if you're not proactive with engaging your consultants, paying people's fees, paying people's signing contracts, it can really, really delay things. And we see it endlessly where we're just waiting on someone, we've done our job, surveyor's done their job, engineers done their job, but they just haven't paid the council fee. And we're just waiting. We chase them up every day and they just don't pay it. Then it gets delayed by a month. And it's like, so just make sure you're being proactive with things. Oops, how do I go to the next one? Yeah. And how this gets to the fun part of this presentation, how to keep the cost down. So Dave, I've got a question for you, and that is, which I'm interested to hear too. What do you think the top 3 biggest costs from a civil engineering point of view that could be avoided with just a simple subdivision? Is there a top 3 that you have that you encounter all the time?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a very broad question, but it's a very important question all the same. Look, and this is very much tied in with Shane. Now, Shane and I, and yourself, Alex, as you know, we're just not people that are professionals in our realm of influence. We also are involved with our own subdivision projects and development projects. So for me, I've been operating 21 years in DRW Consulting. We've done north of over 3,000 projects now. And myself, I'm done many of my own projects development wise. So I bring to, and I know Shane's done the same. I know you've done the same also. So we bring a wealth of knowledge and can look at things from a very macro point of view and come to a decision on the really important issues very quickly. I suppose that's the key. Ironing out the big ticket items, the big expensive items early, and then we can worry about the details later. And so for me, the 3 big issues from a civil engineering point of view, probably one of the biggest ones we have come up is neighbouring permission. And you've hinted at that before. A forward sloping block or a flat block is much better than a rear sloping block. Many of our clients come to us are now unconditional on a project and have not thought about a legal point of discharge going through a neighbouring block. you can very easily end up with a very expensive rental property instead of a good development property, because you haven't project managed that process, taken the risk out of it. So for me, I always like to see people have thought about neighbouring permission and making the effort with neighbouring permission. Half the blocks in Brisbane are rear sloping, half of them are front sloping. So you don't want to do yourself out of half the potential development blocks in Brisbane just because you think, look, I don't really want to approach the neighbour to get permission. I just want the easy ones. Look, everyone's looking for the easy ones. You pay top dollar for the easy ones, but you'll get some bargains on the difficult ones if you're willing to put the time in and project manage it, especially from a point of view of getting neighbouring permission. If you can get neighbouring permission for a rear sloping development, you can change your earthworks and retaining wall costs significantly. If you can't get permission for a block, sometimes you'll have to fill the block, and Shane will probably mention this later. The costs of putting in retaining walls and earthworks are very, very expensive, and especially as you go up in height. 1 metre retaining wall, you know, you're talking about roughly $350 to $400 a square metre. When you start getting 1.5, 2 metre high walls, significantly more. And so it's not hard if you have to fill a block because you haven't been able to get neighbouring permission to actually fill a site and have it cost you $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 for a 2-lot subdivision. Astronomical. It will kill a deal. So if you can get neighbouring permission from your rear neighbour, you take that earthworks out completely. And so that's a massive, massive deal. And obviously for larger projects as well, but for a 2 or 3 lot subdivision, very, very important. So make your effort during due diligence. Don't go unconditional until you get your permission sorted. Number 2.
Dave, I thought I don't want to cut you off, but we will. Can you make the next 2 snappy?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. No, we're pushed for time. Checking sewage complications is very important. Make sure you got no building over sewage issues. You need to divert sewage, things like that. Big issue. And number 3, learning. We just touched on this. Learning from your depth of knowledge from your various consultants. Super, super important. So they're probably the 3 biggest things that'll save you maximum money.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And sorry to cut you short there. I'm just trying to make sure we get to the end and have a good chat. Shane, over to you. So Dave designs them, we get them approved. Do you? Yeah. What comments do you have? I've got a question here. What do you need to be able to price up a prospective subdivision?
So I get people calling me quite regularly saying, you know, I've got this site. How much will it cost to do the subdivision? And that's like asking how long is a piece of string, because I don't know what infrastructure you're going to build. I don't know what, you know, I don't know how many lots you want. So I often need at least a basic plan with where the infrastructure is and what you're planning on doing in order to give you an accurate price. I know Dave will do like a preliminary services report or a little basic sketch plan, and that's really what you need to get an accurate price. So you might, you could do some ballpark figures when you first look at the site, just by looking at it and making sure it's not sloping to the rear, like what Dave said, making sure there's not too many other complications. But I needed some sort of basic plan with a layout of the lots and where the infrastructure is going to go. Once I have that, I can give pretty accurate pricing.
Great. That's awesome to hear. And then we've kind of gone through the general rule of thumb for the construction costs. Thanks for that, guys. Let's with what we know now, let's jump back into draft, and I'd love to hear Shane and Dave's thoughts on what I've drawn. So from a planning point of view, I think that this is fair enough, but I really want to show people how you can use giraffe to really save time and cost. So what do you think, gents? Is there anything that you would change to reduce the construction costs here?
I mean, the only thing I saw is I noticed on properties it said rear access blocks need to be 600 square meters, but great, because giraffe tells us straight away that those 2 blocks are like 500 and something. So that's something we could look at straight away. Also, that driveway, does it need to be 6 meters wide, Dave, if it's only for 2 blocks? Or can it be?
No, very likely only a 4.5 meter driveway for that many blocks, and it only needs to go to the second block, not past the second block.
Yes, of course. So we can bring that back. Oh, so how much have we saved now? So originally,
now you can increase that last lot to a larger size.
So it's about 15 meters, I'd say.
Okay, so 15.
And then and that lot's 600 square meters now.
That's just 10. That's about $14,000 we've just saved right there by just changing those couple of things.
Love it.
So,
yeah. Dave, how long would that have taken you to redesign that, just out of curiosity?
Oh, mate, that's yeah, that would have been a good half an hour sitting down, playing around on AutoCAD. So it's very, very fast. Probably stormwater is the other thing we need to consider on this one too. Detention basins.
Yeah, well, we can
obviously we're going to assume it's falling towards McGinn Road down there, down to the south, I'm assuming.
Yeah, put some elevations on, so it does fall down.
We got some contours. Look, as you know, state planning policy, 6 or more lots, we need a probably an above ground bioretention basin, which could potentially delete one whole lot just because we need underground detention and stormwater quality treatments. So I'm thinking we got 2 ways we can handle that. Put a lot in for that, or if we can get down to a 2 development process. I don't know if you want to touch on that. We can reduce that altogether. But
yeah,
so that's probably another conversation.
Yeah. So all right, I've just put in a 400 square meter bioretention area.
Perfect.
So now I've got
so
7
as long as we
lots,
keep the yield. So whether we can whether we can alter some frontages maybe to get that lot back quickly.
Could we get rid of this road? I think someone mentioned that earlier, actually.
Yeah, driveway access.
All right, it's gone. let's just go for it. Let's move. Let's get rid of the driveway. No road.
Roads change. Sorry, Alex. Roads are about $1,100-$1,200 a lineal meter. So,
well, I just got rid of the road. And replaced what 114 meters of road. Well, yeah, road to a 6.5 meter wide concrete driveway,
which is probably $700 to $800 a lineal meter, Shane, for a 6 meter driveway. Would that be about right?
Hold on. Yeah, I'd say that's bang on, Dave.
Yeah,
but it could be 6 meters, right? So the easement with the
6 meters, yeah, 6 meter driveway within, say, an 8 meter easement.
Yeah, so now we've just saved a bunch of verge space. So now we have bigger lots, don't we? So
yeah, and now so all these lots only need to be 600 square meters, and they're now about 630 on average. So let's see if, because we've lost a lot doing this, so let's see if we can. Yeah, now they're just under. Yeah, we're just not being able to get it. I mean, if we can sneak, there we go. Sneak this lot slightly into that biodiversity area. So that's where we might have to talk to someone else. Then we can pretty much get that extra lot back. So we'll probably cut it short because there's a lot that we could talk about here. I mean, we haven't even gone into infrastructure. I mean, look, yeah, there's a sewer line that runs actually diagonally across here, stormwater out the front. But I would assume, Dave, without going into a lot of detail, that, you know, this would probably ideally kind of be realigned, or
yeah, we could probably realign that, but it's very easy to sort out with Giraffe. You could see exactly what's happening very quickly, and you can alter the lots around the services somewhat with trying to maintain your yield, which is very, very cool.
Yeah. So what do you reckon we just saved? So, well, in planning and drawing alone, you've probably saved at least, I'm going to say at least $1,000, if not $2,000 in our time and costs. And Shane, what do you think we've saved in construction just by?
I reckon 90 grand, right up.
Yeah, 90 grand. Wow.
90 grand.
Yeah, and Dave, what do you reckon in your time in playing around with those things?
Yeah, massive saving. A client comes to me with this information, or I can play around with this information. We can just come to the outcome much more quickly. So massive help to my clients.
Yeah, absolutely insane. So cool. Thanks for your input. I think so we've just gone from 22 lots to 16 lots, down to 7 lots, and then back up to 8 lots. And the idea and why I'm showing you this is because you can actually do that yourself. You can sign up to Giraffe. I'm sure Lucy will put some information at the end and do all that yourself. So thank you very much. I'll jump back into the presentation. We've I'm running late, which is not surprising. If you've got any questions, throw them out there and I'll just quickly smash through the rest. And really the rest of my presentation is about the process. So who you should speak to first and where it goes from there. So generally, first person you'd speak to, sorry everyone, but you should speak to a town planner first. This is assuming you've already got a site, you've done your due diligence. First person, chat to a town planner, they'll connect you with everyone that needs to be part of that subdivision process from that point. Generally, we see subdivisions take 6 to 12 months. They can be a lot faster, obviously, they can be a lot longer, but it just depends on a lot of factors. And that's about it. So once you're done, you've finished everything, you've constructed everything, Shane's offsite, the surveyors come and repegged all the lots. You've got your new titles, you can sell them, and you're on to the next one. One thing that I love about Giraffe, which I thought I'd just mention, is having a dashboard. I use Giraffe as a dashboard for all of the projects that we're working on. And I kind of just love it, to be honest. So you just get your scratch pad up, and then you can pretty much look at every single site that you're working on. So yeah, it's great. Anything you want to touch on, you just go back into it. It might be a project that you already finished, it might be one that you're still working on. Yeah, it's great, good fun. So yeah, that's my presentation done. There's all my contact details. There's information, some resources there on how to get in touch with Giraffe, properties, ERPEC for some online education. And we've got Dave's details if you go to his website there at DRW Consulting, and Shane's are there at Pembroke. Is there any questions? Oh, there are some questions.
Yeah, fantastic. I don't know if we want to go into Andrew's one first about the legal point of discharge.
On the subject of legal point of discharge, so this is probably one for you, Dave. Is it normal to engage in verbal agreement with the neighbour or go down the route of a legally binding contract with the neighbour to avoid them reneging on the agreement?
Yeah, this is a really important question. And I will always say to people, get a legally binding contract. And even though you have a legally binding contract, there's always ways out for the neighbour. We always encourage getting infrastructure installed as early as possible. So we have ways we can do the proper inspections and everything, and we have clearance with council to install stormwater pipes downstream, even before the DA has been approved. So yeah. Organize legal documents, make sure they're tight.
Yep, legal documents. I think that's a pretty good one, and build it as soon as you can to avoid them.
Get in there, dig the trench. As soon as there's a big trench, someone's not going to send you away, because they want the trench filled in.
True. What else do we have? We've got, can you have diagonal lots in Giraffe so that ecology is captured in the back? Yes, you can. You can use Giraffe to do anything you want. It's absolutely
definitely.
flexible.
I think it would obviously change the scheme and add more driveway or more road and increase cost a bit, but certainly you can configure the lots any way you like to.
Yeah. Dan?
Yes, Dan, you can definitely insert images, so JPEGs and PNGs into Giraffe and trace over the top of them. That's super easy.
Yeah, and that's something that I found really useful. So something that we use it for a lot is in these larger subdivision areas where there's, for example, a structure plan that council's made. There's no file for that. There's no layer in any mapping. So what we do is screenshot it and pull the file into Giraffe, scale it, and then all of a sudden you've got an actual structure plan that you can work with. So yeah, I found importing PDFs and sketches and documents is very useful in Giraffe.
Who is Shane?
Rachel, who is Shane? Shane, do you want to give us an overview of who you are and what you do?
Yes. So we're the civil contractors. So once you've got the engineering done and you actually need it built, we're like the builder. So the person who builds your house, we're the people who build the subdivision for you. So yeah. We'll build the retaining walls, build the sewer, build the water, build the roads if you need, demolish the houses, clear the trees, all that sort of stuff.
Yep. The next one we have is properties Giraffe a free tool? If not, how much is the subscription? There's a couple in there about the costs involved. So properties does have you can do one report for free, and then it's charged either month or per report or monthly or yearly after that. So you can just go on the website and see how much they cost. And Lucy, do you want to cover it from a giraffe point of view?
Yeah, so giraffe's exactly the same. Any of you can log on and do one project for free. It won't save your project, but you can stay in there for as long as you need to. If you would like to play around with the Subdivision tool, just get in touch with me and I'll get you set up with a free trial so that you can use it. After that, though, licenses are $3,000 per user per year. But you know, as the guys were saying earlier, if you're spreading that cost across multiple projects or feasibilities, you know, you can end up saving a lot of time and money by connecting to the data layers and having everything in one place. So it's an upfront cost, but I think it can save plenty of time and money. But we'll send some links to both of the tools in an email with the recording after this to you all.
Yeah. And one thing to note that that the Subdivision is an app in Giraffe. So if you go on Giraffe right now, you might not necessarily have access to that app. So make sure you get in touch with Lucy after this.
That's right. Yeah.
Giraffe versus properties. One is a fancier version of the other. Ooh, which one's the fancier version?
Fancy?
So the difference between the two is properties is purely just like a town planning data, I suppose, app. So it tells you things like zoning, what the minimum lot sizes are, what height you can build, what the development potential is. Whereas Giraffe, you draw those things. So that's probably the key difference. You can't draw things in properties. It's just a non-interactive map. So that's probably the difference.
And we can overlay those kinds of data layers, but you know, properties is giving you a really nice summary for that specific site instead of you having to read them and understand exactly what's happening. It sort of gets you to be faster than it would in Giraffe.
Yep, for sure. There's one here about what is a buyer retention. I feel like that could be something that we answer over the next like 2 hours, but essentially buyer retention is an area where stormwater is captured and treated. So when the water leaves your site, it's better than it was when it landed or when it was going to discharge normally. That was probably the worst description of what a buyer retention basin is. And
yeah, mate, that was awesome.
I'm sure. I'm like, Dave's going to call me later and be like, mate, don't ever comment on engineering ever again.
Yeah, mate, as an engineer, you make an awesome town planner. Thanks, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you've got questions about what buyer retention is and things, maybe hit Dave up directly. Can you send Giraffe files to consultants for feedback? Lucy, that's a great question.
Yeah, so there's actually the next 3 questions. I'll answer them all in one go. So yes, Giraffe has like a share with someone functionality. You can send them just the map when they can't edit it, or they can purchase a license and edit at the same time. So Alex has actually shared this project with Shane, Dave, and I, and we were all able to get in there at the same time and have a look around and draw. So it's a collaborative tool. So yes. Rowan has asked, can you export to DWG? Absolutely. You can also import DWGs as well. So if you've already done a little bit of work and you want to get into Giraffe, it works both ways. And then Michaela says, if I'm a beginner, does Giraffe have resources? Yes, we've got a whole bunch of sort of knowledge-based training materials on our website and some other places. So if you're interested in reading through some of the documentation before you jump in, please feel free to get in touch and we can talk you through that. We also, for anyone who is a little bit sort of tech literate, we also have an open API. You can read all the documentation and drop in your own tools as well via API. If that's something you're interested in, definitely give me a call. The next one.
And just, I'll jump in there. Michaela's also said, or is it intuitive enough to not need training? And I don't think I don't think I got any I didn't get any training in Giraffe. I just watched things on YouTube or on their website about it. And it was fine. It was very intuitive. So you will be able to pick it up yourself if you're at all familiar with mapping and planning. So yeah, I think it's fairly intuitive on that front. What do we have? We probably have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. Could I get so we've got an anonymous attendee's asked, can you guys see these questions on my screen? I don't know.
I can. If you all click Q&A at the bottom, you should be able to see these questions.
Cool. So the next one is, could I get an approximate feasibility of the option to subdivide before you put in a contract? Yes, I think you could. The issue is if you're looking at hundreds of different sites to potentially subdivide, then it's going to be near impossible to do that. So generally that's where we tell our clients, start using just general numbers. You know, like a 1 and a 2 lot subdivision might be between 100 and 150 grand. If you need it to be 60 grand to make money, then it's probably not the right site for you. But if you're very close to formally buying a site, then definitely get in touch with myself, Shane, or Dave. We'll be able to give you some decent numbers. Let's click through some of these questions. Ruan's asks, can giraffe capture the bioretention? No, so that's something that would have to be designed by a civil engineer. Brian has asked, can you allocate cost per square meter or lineal meter rate for live cost updates as you adjust the plan? Lucy, so there is a financial model in Giraffe. Could you assign things like cost for roads to automatically tell you how much that might cost?
Definitely. So Giraffe is basically just a big calculator, and what we didn't show you was the actual drawing capability. So after the guys did the subdivision, we can actually draw little houses or duplexes and attribute costs to them. And we could do that for exactly the same way that we would for the roads. And even the biotension pond, if the team knew like a cost per square meter for that kind of a build out, we can attribute that, and then Giraffe will essentially calculate a basic cost based on those square meter or length rates essentially. So yes, we can do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. We're dead on an hour now, so I'll just quickly see if I can do a couple more. So Greg's asked whether or not we pass on the time savings to our clients opposed to charging a flat fee. We certainly do. If someone's, well, we actually send subdivision proposal plans in general inquiries sometimes. So someone calls and says, I've got this site, I want to subdivide it. Can I, what do you think I could do? Is it a good site? I'll actually just get it up in Giraffe and just draw some lines and go, yep, think you should be able to. Here's an 8-lot subdivision proposal. So something that they would usually have to spend $1,000, $2,000 on, we just give it to them immediately for free. So we're all about trying to better our service and win the job and make sure that our clients are making money. So yeah, we certainly do. I can see a lot of these questions are being answered by people typing
away. Sorry.
Anonymous, do you have any courses on subdivisions? We do have a bunch of online courses at URPEC, which is just urpec.com.au. We don't have one specifically on subdivision, but we do have one on site finding in Brisbane, which is very, very useful. So check that out. And I don't know, how are we going, Lucy? Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think let's wrap it up. I'll just make one really quick last point. Lots and lots of people have asked if this is just a Queensland specific tool. It's not, it's actually a global tool. You can connect to any open data layers that governments or businesses publish. It's really easy. If they are not publicly available, we can also help you connect them in other ways. But look, thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it. I want to quickly thank Alex, Dave, and Shane. I think you guys have been fantastic, and I've learned some stuff that I didn't know before, so that's awesome. We have recorded this, so we'll certainly be sending it out to everyone with all of our contact details. So if we haven't got to your question, please feel free to shoot them through to myself or Alex, and we'll try to get back to you pretty quickly. But thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate you for tuning in. We've had pretty excellent attendance the whole way through, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lucy, Dave, and Shane. There's my contact details there if anyone wants to get in contact with me directly, but I'm sure Lucy will send a link out with all those details. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.